we know an awful lot about the multitude of animal and plant species that inhabit our planet. We admire their variety, their beauty, their phenomenal capacity to adapt that enables them to live anywhere, or almost anywhere. But what do we know about things that happen under our feet, in the upper layers of the soil, and in its very depths? In Journey to the Center of the Earth, Jules Verne describes the caves and caverns where flora and fauna, relics of prehistoric times, still survive. Pure fantasy? Not necessarily. Scientists invite us along on a journey into an underground maze with huge surprises in store. They lead us into monumental cavities, shaped by water and by time. They reveal to us mineral jewels of staggering beauty. They shed light on certain species of fauna that defy the imagination. The first creature we encounter when we enter a cave is often a bat. This strange animal lives at the frontier between two worlds, our world and the underground world. Bats are troglocines, which means they use subterranean caves for shelter, but do not complete their life cycle in them. With its comings and goings between the surface world and that of the cave, it fulfills an unexpected function of supply vehicle to the underground.
This is bat guano, and we'll find bat guano more or less everywhere in the cave because they defecate as they fly, as well as underneath the colonies or under their nocturnal roots in the cave. And all the organic matter they bring in will be beneficial to many animal species.
It is the first link in a fragile food chain. The bat feeds on nocturnal insects that very few species are able to hunt. Endowed with unparalleled agility, it can seize its prey in flight with its hind legs. Its acrobatic feats in total darkness are the result of a long adaptation, some 50 million years. To unlock the secrets of their flying skill, Tanguy Stokely sneaks with difficulty through the narrow passages taken by the bats. To film them, the biologist sets up a battery of infrared light projectors, which preserve the darkness.
Here the bat colony is currently over 150 meters deep. The entrance is at 50 meters, and when they leave at night, it takes them a few seconds to fly through these cramped passages.
To fly at more than 30 kilometers per hour in the dark meanders of this underground world, the bat has an extraordinary navigation tool: its echolocation system. It constantly emits a series of ultrasound squeaks that ricochet off the cave walls and return. It can thus represent three-dimensional space and easily avoid obstacles.
They obviously receive an incredible quantity of echoes, especially in environments as congested as this one. And the impressive thing is, they analyze these echoes at such an incredible speed. They have neurological connections 1,000 times faster than ours.
Tanguy Stokely films with a high-speed camera at more than 2,000 frames per second to break down the bat's flight. The cave's rugged relief seems to have shaped the flight of these flying mammals. Their ability to suddenly dip and correct their trajectory is astounding.
These are animals that, in terms of acrobatic flight in their maneuvers, have no equivalent in birds. This is explained simply. The bat's fingers go all the way to the end of its wings, and it is able to fold a phalanx to slightly correct its flight, all at lightning speed.
Throughout its long adaptation, during which its flapping flight and its sonar were perfected, the bat becomes a vital liaison between the surface and the depths of the Earth.
It's true that bats are at the top of a whole ecosystem that is set up thanks to this organic matter. Without them, in fact, this underground life would disappear, be it microorganisms as well as insects, etc.
Let us dive deeper into the discovery of this fragile ecosystem, located at the limits of the bat's territory. This is where the world of biospeleologist Cedric Alonso begins. He patiently and rigorously studies the minuscule cave-dwelling fauna. These species are so small that the inventory of 1 square meter might take him several hours.
The underground environment is not just mineral. We will find life in almost every cave in the world. There's a fauna that is particularly well adapted to darkness, that will not leave the cave. Creatures called troglobites, and they are particularly interesting to study for scientists or anyone who wants to understand the phenomena of adaptation to the environment, the broad lines of evolution.
The species that make up this troglofauna are so well adapted to the constraints of the underground world that they would now be unable to survive on the surface. An entire food chain is organized in the darkness. Locked in an enclosed mineral world, the troglobites, however, depend on the outside world to survive and flourish. Besides the droppings left on the floor of the cave by the bats, organic waste from the surface can arrive via the cave entrance or be carried in by water seepage. How have these tiny animals colonized the underground world?
It's hidden behind the stone, but here we have a typhloblanulus, which is a millipede. Some on the surface resemble it closely, usually colored, of the order Julida. These are millipedes that curl up into a ball. This is a lovely large troglobite. Many of them have an ancestor who came from the surface. We often find the original form outside, so it's normal to observe similarities in shape, like the typhloblanulus, for example, whose every feature resembles the millipedes we see outside, but with characteristics that come from living in darkness.
Thus, the troglobites have surface animals as their ancestors, trapped underground due to the vagaries of climate or geology many thousands of years ago. Though the skin of individuals who always live on the surface is colored with a dark pigment to protect them from daylight, this protection is unnecessary for those who live in the darkness. That's why their troglobite descendants have lost their original pigmentation. Another notable difference is longer legs and antennae. Surface dwellers have eyes that enable them to get around easily while avoiding obstacles. Troglobites have no visual organs, as they would be of no use in the darkness. Their eyes may be replaced by tactile organs. In some species, they exceed the size of their body. Troglobites often proceed by groping around. The underground aquatic environment is also colonized by troglobitic species, especially by numerous crustaceans, some strikingly similar to shrimp.
There are so many species underground, in fact, and each has its own story. Some aquatic crustaceans have marine origins. Hundreds of thousands of years ago, the sea covered this part of France. They lived in the fissures. The sea receded, the animals were left trapped in the karst, and rainwater seepage over time softened the salt water and allowed the animals to evolve, to adapt to fresh water. And now we have crustaceans that we call cave shrimp.
Food is far rarer in underground water than in the rivers and ponds on the surface. Finding it requires considerable energy expenditure, and the weakest cannot resist periods of drought. The most voracious, such as Niphagus, then feed on their corpses. The deeper we plunge into underground waters, the more access to food becomes a problem. The scarcity of resources hasn't prevented the biggest cave predator in Europe from moving in here, almost 30 million years ago. It has the most amazing lifestyle. It lives hidden in little faults. Its territory is so difficult to access that no adult specimen has even been observed in its natural environment. This amazing animal is the proteus, or ohm, nicknamed white salamander or cave salamander. To unlock the secrets of this virtually inaccessible living enigma, French scientific researchers have dug an underground laboratory in Movile at the foot of the Pyrenees. Olivier Guillaume, biologist of the National Center for Scientific Research, CNRS, wonders about the extraordinary longevity of such a small animal.
The ohm is an amphibian, and therefore related to newts and salamanders. It's the only cavernicolous vertebrate in Europe, and has developed the unique characteristics of cave dwellers. It lacks any skin pigment. This animal I'm holding isn't yet an adult, it is 14 years old. They become sexually mature at age 15 and live for 80 to 100 years.
The development of the ohm is distinctive. At the larval stage, the resemblance with its distant newt and salamander cousins is striking. The larvae of each one breathe through external gills. But when the surface water newt metamorphoses and becomes an adult, it loses its gills and develops lungs. The ohm, however, has no lungs and will breathe through gills its whole life. It will remain in a juvenile state, but will gain sexual maturity and an ability to reproduce. It is born with eyes, which degenerate rapidly thereafter.
The ohm moves around very well indeed in its environment using olfactory trails. It releases pheromones, which are odorous molecules, and can detect these trails rather like ants do. It's an animal that moves little. In fact, it spends most of its time stuck in a crack. In its environment, which has no food resources, that amounts to saving energy. But as it has no known predator, it really has no need to develop any avoidance behavior.
Nestled in a fault in the rock or crouching under a stone, the ohm waits patiently for food to come to him. The extreme poverty of the environment means the Ohm is entirely dependent on fate sending debris from the surface.
Experimentally, it has been fasting for several months, and we observe that it hasn't lost weight, or at least very little. So it has a marked ability to fast. In scientific literature, we find references to animals that have fasted for more than 48 months but haven't died.
How an animal with a more than 80-year lifespan can endure 4-year fasts is a mystery that fascinates a good many researchers.
When we examine the Ohm's behavior, we notice that it can remain totally inactive for several days without moving. That doesn't mean that its metabolic rate is under threat. It's rather like the sleep phase in humans. Although the organism remains relatively inactive, it still has its hormone production rates, particularly those hormones related to sleep or to waking.
The CNRS Experimental Ecology Station in Moulis has recreated the Ohm's natural environment. The water temperature must remain stable, and darkness must be constant and permanent. The inmates' movements are recorded by infrared cameras. Oxygen consumption is also measured, as this provides a reliable benchmark in analyzing their metabolic activity. Several months of data recorded by automated equipment are needed to produce results, which are always very long in coming. Despite its lack of activity and the absence of day-night alternation, Olivier Guillaume found that the Ohm follows 10 to 12-hour metabolic cycles, no doubt inherited from its distant ancestors.
The advantage of maintaining such rhythms in a constant environment would be a way of measuring time, and thus of developing an energy management strategy. The Ohm's inactivity could be one of the factors that explain its great longevity. It is estimated that Ohms live more than 85 years, perhaps 100. And in fact, by expending no energy and remaining inactive, it does not produce any toxic byproducts that might attack cells and create what we call senescence or aging.
The Ohm's extremely economic lifestyle is the price to pay for survival in the particularly austere conditions of this underground environment. The ultimate predator, however, is at the mercy of troglobitic animals whose larvae it eats, as well as remnants that trickle down from the groundwater. But some caves are totally isolated from the surface and effectively watertight. Does this mean that they are totally devoid of life? In the Constanta region of Romania, a cave has been discovered that has been cut off from the world for 500,000 years. This underground bubble formed when the Black Sea emptied into the Mediterranean.
I've been here first in my life in 1986 doing some geological survey. My mission was to see if this land is able to support a big thermoelectrical power plant. And I was suspicious that this land can do that because you see this large depression. That's an indication, but it was a collapse, and that was produced because there are caves and karstic voids beneath. And they were indeed we discovered these caves, and later we discovered that this cave is also a unique oasis of biodiversity.
When scientists realized the importance of Movile, they sealed the only access with an airlock that preserves the cavern's extraordinary ecosystem.
Here we are on the bottom of the 18 meters deep artificial shaft dug by miners. And this is glass fiber lid which separates the natural cave from the outside environment. It's like a frontier.
After the access door, we enter a mineral desert. No water seeps in here. We can find no trace of organic matter, be it plant or animal. Totally sealed caverns like these of Movile are extremely rare. They are the result of a very specific geological structure.
If you look everywhere in Movile Cave, you don't see stalactites, you don't see dripping points, you don't see seeping water. Why? Because exists such a clay, very fine clay, which is able to seal all the cracks of the limestone. And we are not very deep, only 20 meters beneath the surface, but the water can't penetrate till here. So the cave is like an isolated volume. We could prove that using different methods, and the most convincing, the most spectacular was this of Chernobyl catastrophe. We were 6 years after Chernobyl catastrophe. Romania was plenty of isotopes like strontium, cesium. You can find them everywhere, but not in Movile Cave.
There is a tiny underground lake in Movile, but its water doesn't come from the surface. It is fed by one of the region's many hydrothermal springs. The concentration of hydrogen sulfide in these waters is so high that the sulfur content in the fumes crystallizes and settles on the walls.
This small lake was the end of my first exploration in the cave. When I reached that place, I felt the smell of hydrogen sulfide. I realized that is something special. And the next big surprise was to see how many animals are moving around, like centipedes, spiders, leeches, and so. From here come the first big question. What all these animals eat?
Here, as elsewhere in the underground world, we must work our way back up the food chain and find the ecosystem's energy base. In Movile, the answer could only lie at the bottom of the lake. A succession of sumps affords access to a series of small cavities.
After we dive in the first lake and we go to the second lake, to the third lake, we face an atmosphere progressively enriched in carbon dioxide. In water, there is no oxygen at all. You know, that's only first quarter of millimeters of at surface is water is oxygen. And down, all water is without oxygen. Why? Because any kind of trace of oxygen should be immediately transformed in reaction with hydrogen sulfide. But we have aquatic fauna in this water without oxygen at all.
How does all this fauna thrive in the total absence of light and oxygen, and in an atmosphere saturated in hydrogen sulfide, a very toxic gas? The solution to the puzzle is found at the water's surface, which develops a thin bacterial film. It consists of bacteria, fungi, and protozoa, which constitute the beginning of the food chain. The bacteria oxidize the hydrogen sulfide present in the atmosphere and in the cave water. This is called chemosynthesis, and in Movile, it can be considered the equivalent of photosynthesis, allowing surface plants and algae to use the sun's energy to manufacture organic matter. In Movile, the energy source at the base of the food chain is not light, but chemical.
Exactly like grass at surface is the base of trophic chain, because herbivores eat the grass and carnivores eat the herbivores. In Movile, we have that chemoautotrophic cream, which is eaten by small animals like worms and snails, so-called the primary grazers, and other animals are eating them. And to the top of the pyramid, we have the carnivores, aquatic like the water scorpion, Nepa, and Hemopis checa, the leech, and terrestrial like centipedes and spiders.
Thus, 30 new species cut off from our world have been discovered in Movile. Forged by a geological accident 500,000 years ago, this cave remains exceptional. The formation of most of the world's caves results in one way or another from the action of surface waters. Rainwater, or water produced by melting ice, is acidic and loaded with minerals. It creeps into the cracks in the ground and begins a long journey underground. Caves only form in rock that is favorable to their appearance. That rock includes limestone. It is soft and vulnerable to acidity. The mechanical force of the water that arrives from the surface attacks the limestone, and its acidity dissolves it. Each drop that falls from the vault, each dribble of water that trickles down the cave wall leaves a minute mineral trace to add to those left previously. Thus, drop by drop, the underground world is mineralized. This process takes place over thousands of years. So it is that fantastic underground cathedrals are born. Their Baroque architecture is a result of the whims of rock and water. Thus are carved the curtains, the pillars, the forests of columns that decorate the richest caves. In a world where there is only rock and water, the animal world as we know it meets its limits. Here begins the reign of another life form. A few years ago, after inching through a very narrow passageway for several hours, a team of speleologists headed by Michel Ronda made an intriguing discovery. Sensing that they were in the presence of a hitherto unknown mineral formation, the team sealed the entrance to the cave to prevent any degradation and alerted Sylvain Monteux, former member of their speleology group, now a biologist at Umeå University in Sweden.
What we call concretions is simply the limestone contained in the water which crystallizes when the water evaporates, and which gives these shapes stalactites and stalagmites, as well as flowstone deposits on the rock, or in the draperies, for instance, which are also pretty famous. But they can also take other forms and follow, for example, a draft or the agitation of air molecules. These are called eccentrics.
As their name indicates, eccentrics grow chaotically, whereas conventional concretions are structured by gravity. Their absence of orientation is explained by the fact that at certain spots in a cave, the forces of gravity, capillarity, and crystallization are equivalent. As a consequence, they cancel each other out, and the concretions that develop in those spots grow randomly. The concretions discovered by Michel Ronda's group are certainly eccentrics, but they present disturbing characteristics. The strands have a greater diameter to those usually seen, and in places develop against gravity. Strangely, their arborescence evokes plants, but they're mineral plants. The cavers face a conundrum.
We see these structures that look rather like bridges. So typically we see this concretion climb up and touch the ceiling, and then branch off to join another point on the ceiling, and continue like that. They're really unusual structures. We see these bridges on numerous occasions, everywhere these colonies exist. It's hard to believe all this happens by chance. So now we're starting to think that it really was organic.
In an attempt to shed some light on the mystery, Sylvain Monteux decides to take a sample and examine it in the scanner.
This is the scanner result. There are only two colors, orange for anything organic and yellow for anything mineral. So we can see that they're completely embedded in one another. There's organic at the surface, there's organic inside, but there's also mineral inside, not just inside the tube. So we observe that it's always totally mixed.
It's not just a random presence of bacteria in the concretion. They're present at the origin of the structure.
Either at the origin or they transformed it. We can't really say yet, but they're clearly involved in making these tubes.
If we trust the scanner results, neither water flows, gravity, nor droughts were the cause of this unknown type of concretions. It was millions of bacteria. They change the rock into calcite, and over the course of their development, form these amazing mineral trees. However, there is one intriguing question. Why do some branches climb towards the ceiling?
Just above these concretions, there's a darker layer in which we find heavy metals, such as copper, uranium, and zinc. And we also find lots of sulfur. Seeing this visible layer at this spot and the concretions climbing towards the ceiling suggested to us that the bacteria are trying to reach the ceiling to feed on this sulfur. And it's known that bacteria know how to use sulfur to grow.
One structural feature also attracted the scientists' attention. At several spots, some tubes are connected to others.
We know that bacteria can communicate with each other at a very basic level. It's called quorum sensing. So it's possible that these bacteria, which are capable of moving around in this environment, in this very calm underground area, would be able to feel these molecules from a greater distance, and therefore of heading towards one another.
DNA tests of these concretions confirm the presence of the bacteria detected by the scanner, and they also testify to a great diversity. 30% of them belong to a non-listed species.
Until recently, we weren't necessarily interested in what was living in the rock, but we realized that the rock isn't an empty, dead environment. So this frontier that caves represent between the organic and the mineral could in fact be a gateway to this living underground environment, which is gigantic.
Work on these bacteria is just beginning, but it is proving very promising for the study of the organization of underground life. Are bacteria, often capable of feeding on sulfur or heavy metals, the only organisms able to colonize the depths of the underground world? The lowest point ever reached by speleological exploration is 2,000 meters below the surface. Only mines, in particular those in South Africa, descend even lower and provide access to the extreme depths. In the Beatrix mine, zoologist Gaëtan Bourgony decided to research the presence of multicellular organisms at a depth of 3,300 meters. His project seemed so far-fetched, it was met with incredulity.
Life underground is far more complex than previously. They thought there are a few extreme mobile bacteria, and that will be about the size of it, and there are some very strange things going on there. But the idea that you would have multicellular complex organisms was completely considered bonkers. Look at all that dirt, man. Look.
Water is indispensable to life. Gaëtan is therefore looking for the presence of organisms in the mine seepage.
So we have a borehole which is valved because there's a lot of pressure behind it, as you have seen. So we attached our equipment here all the way down. And this equipment is specifically to catch anything that is bigger than a bacteria. There's a small filter in here. We want the water here to be exactly as the water was between the rock. And that's why we have this little wheel here, which actually prevents anything from going back up again. This stays like this, flowing for either days, weeks, months, or years. And then we come back, we detach everything, and we go to the lab with this, and we open it under sterile conditions, and then we watch what's inside.
The first sample taken by the filter contained nematodes, little worms whose bodies have no rings.
A nematode is a round worm. They are everywhere, from the deepest sea to high in the mountains. They can be from a few hundred micrometers to several meters long. The reason why you find them everywhere is, first of all, they are very adaptable, and also they are very old in evolution. I mean, nematodes are among the oldest multicellular animals that's still in existence. And nematodes still have biochemical characteristics that is only found back in plants, while they also have genetic characteristics that are only found in bacteria, which confirms that they are quite old in evolution.
To find out what these worms could be feeding on at such a depth, Gaëtan Bourgony visits an old diamond mine, Star Diamond, which opened in the 1900s. Gaëtan was left in no doubt. The nematodes draw their food from the very heart of the rock. And he discovered a major clue in the mine: bacterial colonies that accumulate in water flows as white filaments. With an endoscope, he goes further upstream in the tube to find out more about these bacteria.
We have a borehole here which goes approximately 30 centimeters straight into the rock and ends up in an open small cavity. We saw these massive blooms of bacteria, which is the very first time anybody has seen this before. And we have then collected a few pieces of these, and they contain nematodes. So we have proven that the nematodes actually live within the biofilm, and that not only do they live within it, but the biofilm is actually quite big. I mean, it's much more than we ever anticipated before.
In all likelihood, the nematodes feed on these bacteria, and it seems that each crack in the rock, even tiny fissures, into which water seeps, constitutes an ecosystem in itself. This challenges the ideas we had of the underground world.
If you think about the subsurface, most people think that because of the pressure there is no space there. Everything is so compressed that there is no room, there are no fractures, but actually exactly the opposite is true. But you don't need a huge place to have a lot of life. I mean, think about the size of your thumb. It's enough to have nematodes, bacteria, flatworms, arthropoda, and so on. So it is fractured. It may not be the wide open spaces of Africa, but a thumb is enough to make life flourish.
Could nematodes really colonize the smallest available space? Following his intuition, Gaëtan Bogany returned to the Beatrix mine. He took samples from a forming stalactite to study its structure in the laboratory.
When you look with a CT scan inside a stalactite, then you actually see that it is not a solid mass of crystals, but it's actually hollow. As you can see very clearly here, there are a lot of hollow spaces where you can easily imagine that nematodes could actually live. And we then cracked one open and looked with the electron microscope, the image you see now, and there you can see on the outer layer, the pink one is the hard layer, the brown is the biofilm, and all the blue ones are actually the nematodes living inside the stalactite. What people do not seem to grasp yet is that studies seem to indicate more and more that if you have a scale and you put all subsurface life on one end and all life on the surface on one end, that the balance actually goes like this, which means there is much more life underneath our feet than there is above on the surface. And that is quite amazing if you come to think of it.
So we know that multicellular organisms that live at great depths feed on bacteria. But this throws up other questions. What do the bacteria feed on? How do they colonize the subterranean rocks? Part of the answer lies in Iceland. Here, volcanism is extremely active, and geothermal energy has long been harnessed. Deep drilling captures the volcano's hot gases and sends them to the surface, where they turn the turbines of power stations. These volcanic gases contain large quantities of carbon dioxide, otherwise known as CO2. To stop it polluting the atmosphere, the Icelandic operators re-inject it into the substratum. They think that the carbon in the gas, under high pressure at depths, will be transformed into carbonate, in other words, into mineral, and will stabilize. For Bénédicte Ménez, geomicrobiologist at the Institut Physique du Globe de Paris, and his team, the Icelandic sites are a godsend when it comes to studying underground bacteria.
The Icelandic experiment is an opportunity to manipulate things on a very large scale, with huge quantities of carbon injected, so we'll be able to follow in real time the evolution of these ecosystems and the way in which they react, positively or negatively, to these carbon injections.
To find out how the organisms in the Icelandic substrata react to massive injections of CO2, we must drill into the rocks that form the mantle's compact crust. Will we find large numbers of bacteria in the rock cores that drilling will bring to the surface?
What will determine the maximum limit for which we'll find life in the depths is the temperature. As there's no life possible after 120 degrees, according to what we know now, 120 degrees in terms of depth is the equivalent of 10 kilometers, depending on the region.
Benedict Menez does not aim to reach this limit. She is interested in the zone between 400 and 500 meters deep, where the CO2 was injected. The drill cores are a unique chance to access this microbial life, about which we still know very little. With the high subterranean pressure tamping the rocks, the bacteria are forced to take advantage of the smallest microcavities to settle and grow. At first glance, Benedict and her team spot a green color that stirs their curiosity.
This green and orange biofilm really is everywhere, sometimes with these little white carbonate crystals. And however porous the rock is, even in the most dense zones, this green biofilm fills all the pores, the fractures. And we've had this for 30 meters, since we reached a depth of 410 meters. It's amazing because all this CO2 wouldn't have been converted into mineral, but it would have been assimilated by all the microorganisms to grow, to fill up all the pores in the rock and multiply.
The bacteria are indeed extremely numerous, at a depth where food is normally very rare. Their astonishing profusion could therefore result from injecting carbon dioxide into the substratum. To know for certain, Benedict and her team divide the samples and chemically prepare several specimens for closer study. To understand where these bacteria get their food, the scientists have developed a special microscope which, on a microorganism scale, can distinguish organic cells from minerals and thus analyze their interaction.
Did you find something in the rock samples we brought back the other day?
Yes, I colored them to highlight the microorganisms. These are all small cells that team up with each other and make large bacterial filaments that we see here in green, which are gradually encrusted with minerals. Here and here. The minerals appear in pink and the bacteria chains in green. It'd be interesting to know exactly what they feed on.
So they're totally transforming the rock, altering it and creating these new structures. With lots of chemical reactions happening deeper down, it'd be interesting to know whether they're able to develop from all these compounds.
The amazing thing is, here they're really feeding on deep fluids, totally independent of what's happening at the surface.
The microscope is categorical. There is interaction between the bacteria and the mineral. But this doesn't explain where the bacteria find the organic matter they need to feed on in a compact environment a long way from the surface. Unless, Benedict Menez and her team wonder, is this organic matter produced by the rock itself?
These rocks are not supposed to be on the surface of the Earth, so when they're brought into contact with water, they become unstable and transform the water into hydrogen. And the hydrogen, in fact, is the key between the inorganic world and the organic world.
The contact between water and the rock produces a chemical reaction that releases hydrogen. This gas combines with carbon, naturally or artificially present in the chinks in the rock. This combination generates complex organic molecules, one of which is methane. And methane is one of bacteria's favorite foods. Bacteria, therefore, can find an abundance of food at the heart of the rocky mantle. We're at the very frontier between mineral and organic. This discovery is an important breakthrough in the understanding of life. Among the molecules produced, we find certain amino acids which make up the building blocks of life. Our body, like all living things on Earth, consists essentially of amino acids and water. The world underground is not the underworld where the shadows of the dead reside, as the ancient Greeks believed. In fact, we now wonder whether it didn't play an active role in the appearance of life on our planet. The exploration of the depths of the Earth imagined by Jules Verne is only in its infancy. No doubt, it has as many surprises in store as has our exploration of the universe.